I am Josh Moenning, Mayor of the City of Norfolk, and joining me on the panel are Jeff Berggren, Nebraska Program Manager of GenPro Energy Solutions, and Travis Kepler, Director of Engineering, GRNE. And I'm sorry, we had a substitution late at the end. Drake, and I forgot your last name, Drake. Beckstead, Drake Becksted with Interconnection Systems. So we're going to take a few minutes here to introduce ourselves, and I will act as moderator, and then we'll leave some time for questions at the end. So we're going to move right through this, given it's a pretty limited amount of time. I'm going to start by telling you why I'm involved in this. As Mayor of the City of Norfolk, we went through the process with NPPD, our energy provider, of establishing a community solar project that is being built right now, is under construction. And our selected developer through that process was GenPro. And so Jeff is going to talk a little bit more about the technical issues behind that project. But I wanted to start out just by saying why we were motivated as a community to engage in renewables. So the Norfolk Community Solar Project, again, is a partnership with Nebraska Public Power District, will be, once it's established, for the time being anyway, the largest community solar project in the state at 8.5 megawatts, and will be tied to a battery energy storage system. So the timing on all of this helped in terms of market conditions, making renewables cost competitive. And all of these factors, the fact that solar prices have come down significantly in the last 10 years, along with wind, and where Norfolk lies in the state, northeast Nebraska, being a hotbed of renewable generation activity in the last few years, helped convince our elected officials that exploring a community renewable project was a smart and prudent thing to do. Nebraska obviously has a lot of resource in both solar and wind, and that helps. And we've also seen the benefits economically in our region in terms of new jobs and new farm income and new tax revenues that come with renewable generation. But this project, the community solar project, price-wise, will be an opportunity, we think, for those in our community who wish to participate to actually achieve cost savings on their bills, which made the project very feasible in the minds of our city council, and something that they didn't have a whole lot of reservation taking on and moving down the road in the process of. So that's where we are today. This has been a years-long process, as things can tend to be. They take longer than you expect, especially larger projects, but we are now seeing construction. This is 75 acres of Norfolk City well fields on the west edge of town. So if you've been through Norfolk or been to Norfolk Highway West 275, as you enter town, this will be the first thing you see, which we also like. The visual component of this, educational component, why are we doing this? Helping, I think, solidify Norfolk's embrace of renewables in our local economy. We would very happily be like to be known as Nebraska's renewable capital, and this project is going to help. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to talk more about this project and others that GenPro is working on.
Well, it looks like Josh was fast enough and we've only lost about 20% of you to naps. So I'll talk to the remaining 80%. I'm Jeff Berggren, been in solar for about 13 years with GenPro Energy Solutions. But GenPro Energy is actually part of a larger group of a couple other companies called N-Solar. And this is the group that we worked with NPPD and the city of Norfolk to develop this project. N-Solar is a little different group. Our mission statement is to provide every Nebraska community with the opportunity for high quality, affordable, clean energy that's integrated with the local public power district or the municipalities. We've taken that approach. We found that it's worked really well. As a lifelong Nebraskan who's done renewable energy business in several other states with private power companies, I can tell you that working with the public power is often a boon. We have very high rates or low rates of outages, and we've got some pretty good rates in this state. So working with them to get the communities on board has really been a great partnership. And this project is a very good testimony to that. It's actually a whole bunch of entities working together with NPPD right in the middle, as you can see. Had Josh and other city staff working with us to get it put together. And then we partnered with Northeast Community College, and we got a lot of those students running around helping out today. We'll talk about what we've got going on there afterwards. And then the primary companies of Solar are Mesner Development, Sol Systems, and then GenPro. So for this system, it is, as Josh mentioned, it's going to be the biggest in the state for just a little while. Sounds like OPPD kind of announced 81 megawatts this morning, so they're going to blow this out of the water pretty quickly. And it is one of the first battery interactive that's coming down the line. It's going to provide over 16 million kilowatt hours per year for the city of Norfolk, which is a pretty good chunk. They kind of did the maximum, didn't you? We did the maximum we could do with the city side, and that's all based on their peak load through the MPPD programs. As Josh mentioned, this was out on the city well field, and solar development's never easy. And so, of course, there had to be something out there that slowed us down. And that is one of the main lines runs right through that. So instead of having a really nice rectangle, we were able to develop around it and squeeze everything we needed to out there. As a group, Solar really hates to take productive land out of production, whether it's cropland or land that could be used in expansion around a city for new housing or things like that. So city well fields are really good spots in that we can't build anything else on them. When we drive our piles down the 6 or 8 feet, whatever they are, that can be reclaimed after the current contract's up, 25, 30 years. So that field can come right back, and there's really no danger to polluting the water source underneath. So well fields work really good. We go next to wastewater treatment plants a lot because nobody wants to be next to the treatment plant, and they use a lot of electricity. So works really well. I got a little more optimistic picture than what he showed, and we do have a live camera feed up on the Norfolk's website and the Solar website if you guys want to see. Piles are driven. We've got some torque tubes up. The supply chain hurt us a little bit, but we're right on schedule. And thankfully, we've got all our steel and the panels coming in. The battery is actually going to arrive here in January, and when the cool work's going to start. There's a picture of the battery. It's a SunGrow Samsung unit. It's a 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt hour battery. We sourced it because of its easier integration with the NPPD systems, giving them more control. And also because of the supply chain, we were able to get one of these, and it was very highly rated. So we're happy to have the Samsung and the SunGrow product that's going to be used up there. I want to talk a little bit more about the community side, because this is where I really think these projects come into being. With Northeast Community College up there with their wind and their solar program, along with their electrical program, we really wanted to work with them. And Sol Systems was instrumental in helping us put together a scholarship program. And what started out as 1 scholarship morphed into 3. And we're still taking applications. It's open to all the students there that are in the program, and it's been working really well. I've been up and talked to the kids multiple times, just got done with their career fair and had a lot of interest. So that program is kind of leading the state with the community colleges right now, from what I've seen. Just really cool what they're doing up there. And to have this project right up the road from them, it's really working well. On top of that, GenPro then started the internship program. And we currently have 3 students out there, and they're doing everything from learning how to run the trencher to watching the pile driver. We try to get them as hands-on as we can. And these are paid internships. We still have some openings. We had 3 sign up right away. The kids' caseload or school load is pretty high. They go Monday through Thursday, but our team works a lot of times on a 7-day shift or a 15-day shift. So there's a lot of weekends the kids can come out and help us. So we've still got some positions open, and we'll be working up there with the kids through the spring of 2022. On the community side as well, when this all comes together, it takes a lot of work, but it's really rewarding, and it's something that's going to pay off for the city of Norfolk for a long time, and we're really proud to be part of it.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our session. I'm Travis Kepler from GRNE Solar. We are a turnkey EPC that operates throughout the whole Midwest. We are a developer as well as an owner and operator. We're currently developing 3 projects with Nebraska Public Power. So I'll go through some high-level details here of our company. I'm from our Lincoln, Nebraska office. We have offices in Palatine, Illinois, warehouse in Elk Grove Village, Illinois, Iowa City, Iowa, as well as Indianapolis, Indiana. All right. So GRNE has been a family-based company since 2012. We operate a full-service cruise. As I mentioned, we're a turnkey developer. We do as much work in-house as possible. We operate in the residential, commercial, and small utility scale space. We have over 2 decades of green building experience. We have all the NAPCEP certified professionals, and we offer a full service in-house crew. That background is one of the projects that we developed recently in Illinois that we own and operate at a wastewater management facility. All right, what we do. So we carry everything from the beginning of a project all the way through to the end. We offer commercial and utility scale, residential solar installation, project engineering. We do operations and maintenance for third-party customers after projects are built that we didn't install. We have a whole fleet of crews that install EV chargers, and we do a fair amount of residential and small commercial battery storage as well. Again, these are a bunch of the same things that were on the previous slide, but this is kind of from start to finish, all the different components that we're able to offer and help install. As I mentioned, we do residential as well. So on all of our local branches, we have a pretty local presence at each one of the offices. We have a pretty diverse crew that does a lot of different things, and it keeps us all busy. So now I'll get to our Nebraska community solar projects here. We're currently developing 3 projects with NPPD. We have one in Ainsworth, which was just recently commissioned. We're setting piles in York, and then Ogallala is having equipment delivered as we speak. So Ainsworth is just under 700 kW DC, 500 kW AC. It is a single axis tracker, and you can see all the fun facts there. One unique thing that we were really excited about with this project is when NPPD went out to the community to sell their solar shares, they almost instantly sold out. They were sold out by the next day. So we're really proud of how the community has supported that there. York, Nebraska is currently under construction. We have about half of our piles set there. This is on Highway 81 going north out of town, just south of the landfill. There's kind of some trees around the perimeter, so you can't even hardly see that it's there, but we are there. So this one covers about 17 acres. It is 4.3 megawatts DC, 3.5 AC. And this is one of the larger projects that we've developed here in Nebraska. And then last but not least is our project out west in Ogallala, Nebraska. This will be just south of the interstate, about a mile. It's 2.1 megawatts DC, 1.5 AC, I believe. And it covers about 8 acres. A few things about GRNE. We like to be very active in the community. We do have a podcast that they wanted me to plug. So we try to keep up on current events. And if you want to hear more from me, I think I'm slated for December 3rd on some off-grid battery storage options. And we'll wait till the end for questions.
Hello, everyone. I'm Drake Beckstead, Contracts Administrator for Interconnection Systems. Filling in for Jeff Cook-Coyle, our Director of Project Development. Unfortunately, he fell ill and was unable to make it. So I'm going to do my best to fill in for him. I know he's very excited to be here, but what I'll do for us today here is go over what ISI is and talk about some of the things we've been doing here in Nebraska as well as in general in 2021. Oops. All right, so ISI, our mission is to connect the world to the future of energy. Nebraska is our home, though, and that's where we like to put a lot of our focus. But we do work nationally, primarily focusing in the heartland and Midwest. But we do have also international opportunities that we're looking at as well. So we're very diverse in our ability to tackle the market at large. We do commercial and utility scale generation. Actually, this slide is not what I planned on presenting, but we do utility distributive generation as well as commercial scale is a primary focus for our EPC side. We do development as well, so we can take everything from a high-level concept all the way through to commissioning of a project, as well as operations and maintenance. We also are expanding into BESS, and we have several facilities we've constructed in Colorado as well as other Midwest states. And we are, sorry, this is kind of messing me up here, not having the right slide, so I apologize for that. I'll just move on here. Sorry about that. We do have a pretty extensive experience with our leadership team. We have managed 30 to 800 megawatts of projects. We have 25 plus years of experience. ISI has been in business since 1996, and we have over 80 years of leadership experience in the power industry. We've installed quite a significant amount of power generation in the years that we have been working on solar. 2015 was our breakthrough year, and since then we have worked through quite a bit of solar installation. I'm going to skip through that there. This is not the right slide. Apologize for that again. Thought it'd be interesting to bring up that in 2015 is where we started with locally localized and locally owned generation through working through the public power districts, and focusing on finding not only places that could utilize local distribution with infrastructure investment with localized generation, but also how we can benefit local communities by making sure that we have local ownership of these facilities and bringing those tax credits in, as well as offering that economic boost that these projects do. So here is Pandorf, and in 2015, that 600 kilowatt facility was the largest in the state, and we can see how much that has changed in just such a short amount of time for the state. Again, there's a few more here that have been highlights of the Custer Public Power District projects that really started ISI off in that time frame. And it's as simple as just finding a pasture, something that can that can be utilized for something a bit more productive than growing grass. And we've got a situation where we can site and construct a very, very high production facility. We were part of the Kearney project with NPPD, City of Kearney, and partnering with SoCore Energy and constructing that facility, and currently is still the largest operational one, but of course Norfolk will be the one that will overtake that, and of course with the OPPD announcement there, we'll see much more in this state coming. Elkhorn portfolio was one of our big projects for this year in 2021, 4.5, a 3.5, and a 2.5 as part of that portfolio, which was very important for us to be able to again work here in Nebraska and provide quite a bit of generation. This one in particular was another 2021 project that we've brought online, and this circles back to the locally owned and local generation. We wanted to comment on how we found not only an opportunity to provide distributed generation, but also to help serve individuals in local communities. The farmer that owns this land, that has the lease agreement for this facility, was looking for a way to fund the future for his daughter, who does have a disability, and he wanted to make sure that in his absence she would have a form of income. And through this project, we were able to do that for him. ISI actually owns this project, and through working with SCPPD, we were able to not only site but bring this to fruition in a fairly quick time frame. And I did have a BESS slide here, but apparently we've lost that. But we have been working on BESS in multiple states, as I mentioned before, and we do see that as quite a lucrative venture, and it's coming up, and it will integrate very well into our model of localized ownership and generation as we go forward, and looking forward to constructing our first project in Nebraska very soon.
All right. Thank you, Drake and Jeff and Travis. So we've got a decent amount of time here yet for questions. I think we have a volunteer out in the crowd with a microphone. Is that correct? Yes, we do. Any questions from out in the audience? Well then, I'll start. So this morning, we got a good glimpse of national trends and a good report from each of our public utilities on the state of affairs and the energy landscape across the state and nationally. But I was interested particularly in this session because we're talking here with Nebraska-based businesses who are doing the work on the ground and are engaged in the business end of this. So I want to, and each of you kind of touched on this in your presentations, but your customer base in a lot of cases are cities, municipalities, rural public power districts. What are you seeing as motivations for your customers to participate in these distributed generation systems? What are you hearing most? What is the value proposition that you're out there selling in the field for doing these projects?
Number one by far in the last 2 years specifically has been economic development. It started with our smallest project out in Venango, Nebraska. Venango was right on the Colorado border. They were approached by a large agricultural company to bring in a new site that would employ over half the town. It's only about 80 people. They were going to spend upwards of $10 million in the community, but they weren't coming without renewable energy. And NPPD stepped up and developed the Sunwise program back then, got them that renewable energy, and the company did come across the border to Nebraska. Since then, other communities, I like to say it used to be about the green, and for sometimes the customer, it is about the green, but it's this green that is for the utilities and the economic development, and it's here. Multiple communities we've worked with are attracting outside entities to come to their town and hook to their grid because of the renewable energy.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Jeff said. That's definitely true. We are seeing a lot of economical factors drive the development of these projects, and it does go a long way, especially for a community to stand behind something that they can be proud of and participate in. It goes a long way, especially from an educational standpoint and teaching the local communities and help them be sustainable for the long term.
I don't know how much else you can say. That pretty well covered it. But I do find it interesting. We're working with these local communities. They're very, very eager to construct these facilities, to have that economic development. But it's very new for them. And the development of that, a lot of even just simple things, the permitting process, for example, is very much oriented towards traditional construction and not generation facilities. So navigating with that is kind of, it's almost going hand in hand. You kind of lead them just a little bit and you answer a lot of questions. And by the time you're done just with the early stages development process, the community seems to be even more excited about having that localized generation and having pride in it, and something that they feel is very unique is not just a sale point, but that distributed generation is just critical to them. And that's what we're seeing from our side at ISI.
We have a question over here.
Is there an opportunity for further hybridization, I guess, in solar and battery storage? What I'm wondering, can you help me make the case, the use case? Green Mountain Power offers its residents cost share on batteries in their houses. So they buy down the power or what it costs by half or more. It may be too complicated of an engineering problem, but would a community buy down for batteries be helpful to integrate with a community solar so that that project can get more battery perhaps with community support? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a plausible idea. In the end, it all comes down to economics and who's going to pay for all these components and how quickly are they going to pay for themselves as well as perform well. So in the end, if you have more financial backers and both parties are reaping the benefits of that, then it's going to go a long ways to project the project to be more successful.
I think what the buy down programs you're talking about is that's a instant benefit to that homeowner or business owner because it's a backup, or it may even be, a time shifting for them if they've got varying rates throughout the day. If the community was small enough and the battery was large enough and everybody had to buy in, yeah, could you save a 2-hour gap in power for the entire community? And with the way the batteries are scaling now, I think that's right around the corner. I think it could be a viable option here in the near future.
Speaking of the value proposition, or the green as you want to call it, are the incentives for solar systems the same as wind systems where the landowners get a fee and also there's property tax abatement for the county?
Yes and no. So the solar is structured a little bit differently than wind is. So it depends on how the land was developed and who the landowner actually is. So some of these projects, the land is still owned by the local municipality, and some of it is being bought and not owned by the utility, or the municipality, but by the developer. So there's different setups that each party is able to take more or less advantage of the tax situation. For the county, that is going to depend. For the most part, most of our scale solar developments aren't large enough to make a huge difference. So for the most part, it stays the same.
I guess there is the nameplate capacity tax that will go to the local jurisdiction that helps. And some of these gigantic systems that are being proposed, that nameplate capacity tax is going to add up to be significant for especially the rural counties where these things might end up.
And so that nameplate capacity, just to be clear, across the board for both wind and solar, it's per megawatt, right? I think it's somewhere around $3,600 per megawatt. Is that okay? All right. Well, we'll find out later.
We'll find out.
Any other questions from the audience? Right.
Okay. One of the slides that Drake just went past, you had something about keeping the money in the state of Nebraska. How important is that to the developers that are, to the folks that are on the panel today? And how much of a consideration is that in the work that you do?
So, and again, we didn't really mean to incorporate that one, but I'm glad you picked up on that because that is for ISI when it comes to our Nebraska-focused projects, pretty important. We do want to make sure that when we're thinking specifically in the realm of advancing the state, of building our economic base, and providing this distributed generation and investing in our infrastructure, that we have that opportunity to bring it in. So if there's the opportunity for community solar scale projects for localized ownership and distribution, that we want to be able to seize that. And primarily the idea is if as Nebraskans we are paying outside organizations for that generation, if we are letting other states develop their renewable generation base, we are going to be importing that power at some point because our generation, if it does not match our needs as we go forward, which as we develop into a more electric focused transportation system, as I think we can all see is happening with the EVs and perhaps even in public transit, we're going to need that and we're going to pay for it one way or the other. So if we're able to utilize the federal incentives that are occurring right now and going forward in the future, just from the ITC standpoint, if we're able to pull those dollars in and keep them in Nebraska, the nameplate capacity tax is a great example of how these larger facilities especially will be contributing to our localized communities. And of course, the farther west we push, the more and more important that is. And coincidentally, the farther west we push in the state of Nebraska, the better the production is. So I hope I'm answering your question, but it is incredibly important to ISI. I can't speak for our colleagues up here, but when it comes to Nebraskan solar and wind generation, ISI is very interested in assisting in that development and that economic support that we desperately need. Well, maybe not desperately need, but I shouldn't say it that way. But we very much want to help the state grow and be competitive, and that is a primary focus at ISI.
Yes, definitely. So I would say that as a lifelong Nebraskan, that's always at the forefront of our goals are to help each other succeed. So even if we need to do additional planning to source something locally, It goes a long way to be able to just go to a local vendor and say, hey, I need this. Do you have this? Or how quickly can you get this? So it definitely is important to us to help fund and support the state of Nebraska.
Yeah, it's number one for us as well. When we were starting this in 2014, 2015, looking at the community scale things that were coming down the pipe, and they were coming pretty quickly, we were looking for partners in Nebraska, and they were few and far between back then, if they existed at all. So when we did find a partner, that was kind of something that was really important to us. And with Sol Systems, we found where they have moved staff to the state, and it's become one of their most important markets. So we kind of worked the economic development the opposite way and brought what we needed into the state to get things done, and it's worked out really, really well.
I'll just add to that, as an elected official, I know that it was a lot easier for our city council to get behind the idea of working with a Nebraska-based business, a local business that would be keeping that money locally, especially where we see a lot of generation, which has been good on a macro level to our region. But I think it's seen as even more beneficial when that production is happening at a local basis, and those companies are here on the ground, so to speak, in Nebraska. Any other questions from the audience? Here.
Yeah, just kind of a quick series of questions here. I was curious, was there, when this first started, was there initial pushback and resistance that you had to overcome locally? Did this become politicized? How were you able to overcome that, and what lessons, what are the takeaways that you think other communities can absorb from your experience with wind and solar in Norfolk and in Northeast Nebraska?
Yeah.
It seems to be quite successful.
Well, I'll start with that. I think politics goes away when people are making money, right? So I mentioned before that a lot of the benefit that we've seen from generation regionally has been in the form of new farm income through lease payments, in the case of wind turbine leases. And now we're seeing more and more interest in solar that way. New tax revenues that come into school districts and county governments from these projects, and new job opportunities for, I think some of the students from Northeast Community College are here today, based out of Norfolk, one of the only accredited wind energy training programs in the state. And that program has been in existence for more than 10 years now. 10 years ago, when it started, those kids ended up having to find jobs in Minnesota or Iowa. But now that there's generation happening here, they can stay in Nebraska and stay closer to home and start careers and start building families in rural places. And that's good for everybody. And that goes into the business recruitment part of this too. I think clean energy generation has a lot of benefit to both rural and urban places. You have examples like Facebook and their establishment here of data centers outside of Omaha, and the connection that they have to a Northeast Nebraska wind farm that is virtually providing the power for those facilities. So I think it's a lot easier for this to become real and not political when people see and experience the real world benefits of this happening and playing out in their communities. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add?
Yeah, it's I've been doing this for 13 years now, and it used to be I'd have to beg a landowner to call me back or go out there and get run off the property. And when the utilities started getting involved, and the first communities were jumping on board, all of a sudden the script flipped. And I think that's just a very Nebraska way of thinking. I'm going to let the neighbor do it first. We'll see how he does for a year, and then I'll get it. And as more and more pins get put on the map by us, it just gets easier and easier. And now the phone rings instead of having to make the phone calls all the time.
And I'll talk specifically to the community solar development. I think a lot of that comes back to being transparent up front and selecting a good site. So many of our sites are already owned by the city, which helps them not have to go out and seek and purchase additional land, whether it's something that's not currently being utilized or has been remediated for some reason. It helps a lot that something is already in the physical possession of the community, and that they can just use it to help benefit there further.
not to repeat anything that's been said, but to add to that, even when having discussions with communities that do not have direct siting that they have control over, it isn't very difficult in today's world compared to just 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, like you were saying, Jeff, to find those landowners who are willing to lease and are able to see that economic benefit of having these generation facilities on their land. And they're often vying for it when they find out that there's a potential that something could be coming through. Sometimes they do reach out and contact you first before you're even able to put a pin on their pivot corner or soybean field at the edge of a town. So yeah, it's a completely different realm from what it is. And I don't know that I've ever seen it be a political discussion in my time in renewables.
Having come from a farm background, one of the lessons you learn is don't waste anything. If it's useful, use it. And we have a lot of wind in Nebraska, and we have a surprising amount of solar potential. So I think that principle plays itself out in clean energy generation. I think once you peel the layers off and take the politics out of that, intuitively, it's an issue that appeals to all sides. Other questions?
I have a question about technology. Solar panels probably are different today than they were 20 years ago. What's the the future of solar? My question is really, can we do more with what we have now in terms of solar fields? I know we want more solar fields, but what's the potential for doing more with what we have? Thanks.
So I can go ahead and start with that one. So when it comes down to an actual solar field, the physical solar module itself is a very small component in the grand scheme of things. So right now we're using 400 to 600 watt solar modules, and lots of times they're a bifacial solar module, which means they have cells on the front as well as the back that can collect any reflection and boost the production. So the majority of the infrastructure is already there. The racking's there, the inverters are there. So when it comes down to it, in 5 years, if we have some phenomenal technology leap where we can repower the system, all we have to do is swap out the solar modules. So in the end, right now, they're kind of the best that we have. In a couple of years, that could easily change, but it's a very simple component of the system to swap out and upgrade.
Yeah, that was spot on. You're already seeing systems in Arizona, Nevada, and California being repowered, just taking off those old panels. And that brings up all the recycling questions and everything else, where there's a ton of development money happening right now to reclaim all those chemicals and silicon used in the panels. So with the battery storage right around the corner or here now, if you heard the talks earlier about the AC or the DC connect to these existing systems, it'll be easy to go back and add an AC connect. That picture I showed of that battery, it's basically a cargo container. They're easily moved and you can get them set up and they're stackable. So if you want to add one and add 10 more down the line, that's going to be really easy to do as well.
Yeah, as far as you brought up with recyclability of the actual solar panels, how far have we come on that? Are the solar panels themselves, are they actually a recyclable material, or is that something that just is waste? And I'm asking because I just don't know.
So from a basic standpoint, a solar module is comprised about 5 different things. There's more than that, obviously, but there's typically an aluminum frame, which can be recycled. There's a polycarbonate tempered glass that's made of silicone, can be recycled. And then there's the solar wafer, and often more than not, a back sheet, which is kind of just a piece of paper. So if you break down all of the individual components, they can be extracted and used for other methods. One thing that I've seen quite often is if there's a solar module that, say, a hailstorm comes through and it's not completely destroyed, there's people that are selling these off to areas that are just looking to buy up. They have plenty of space, but they can repurpose that cell. So it might not be the newest, latest, greatest technology, but it's still going to work and fit their needs. So it's kind of getting a second life rather than just being recycled or put in a landfill.
Yeah, reusing of the panels for anything from water pumping to third world developing nations be used all over. I know there are two companies that are really focused on the recycling in Australia, and I think another one is based in Japan. But there have been some really good breakthroughs of reusing 90%, or it's getting pretty high up there now. The battery is the same concern. There's companies like Redwood Materials now that they're taking batteries out of everything from the bird scooters and everything else you see and repurposing them in a lot of different ways. So the recycling, us being a renewable project or product already, that's going to be a huge component here in the next couple of years.
Well, we have a little bit of time left. One of the interesting maps that you have in your program is solar power generation potential across the state of Nebraska. So I mentioned before that Nebraska has a surprising level of solar energy potential, but it's variable across the state. It's varied across the state, especially higher in the west and southwest, and lesser as you come east. So I wonder, in terms of developing projects, how much does that factor into feasibility as to where you are in the state of Nebraska and where these projects might land in the state of Nebraska?
Guess I'll start again. So I think a lot of that comes back to what the local demand is. So the majority of the projects that I believe we're all developing right now are on the eastern half of the state. So in order to not get into the SPP queue, we have to not backfeed any power onto them, which means it has to be used up locally. So that's what's driving a lot of the development in our larger communities here on the eastern half of the state. If we get out west, which is where I'm from, so I would love to see some more development out there. But it's going to require a little bit different strategy or maybe some aggregation between multiple communities.
Yeah, so when we're modeling, especially for the output between the western half and the eastern half of the state, the PPA, the power purchase agreement, is taking that all into effect. It's going to affect your per kilowatt hour price. It's going to potentially reflect, the payback and everything else. So there is a difference, but with the modeling we have today in the software, it's really easy to get the efficiencies and make sure the price is matching what you're going to produce per year, is mainly what we're worried about.
Well said. A lot of what we're seeing, of course, is on the east half of the state, but then the I-80 corridor, and that is heavily focused, as you said, on where the consumption of that power is. I think as we increase our infrastructure and perhaps as Nebraska advances towards being a large producer with renewable generation, and we start entering utility scale generation instead of a lot of what we're doing with distributive generation, I think you will see that increase drastically as you head west on I-80, especially as you can see on that map in those peak areas where production potential is the highest. But right now, it's more of an infrastructure and a consumption question.
And quickly, with the backlog that we've been hearing about within Southwest Power Pool and the lengthy process it takes to get utility scale projects done, do you see that being a driving force for distributed generation projects moving forward? Okay, with that. All right, good. Okay, we have reached the end of our time. Thank you for participating in the session. Again, reminder on evaluation forms. And if you completed those, they can be dropped off at the back of the room. Thank you for attending.